Good morning. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us for our virtual workshop, our human resource series, Developing an Employee Handbook. My name is Heather Fay, and I am the Regional Program Director and Ballagah Advisor for the Roanoke Regional Small Business Development Center. Let's go ahead and get started with some housekeeping things. Also, I encourage you to grab a pen and paper to take notes. We are recording today's workshop, and I will share that with you after the workshop concludes today, and I will also be posting this on our YouTube channel. All right, if you have joined me or my colleagues for a workshop before, you know that we love to engage with you all. Please use your emoticons and your Zoom menu to let us know, or our presenters know, that there's something that resonates with you and that you find it valuable. Closed captioning is available through the Zoom menu. If you would like to have access to that, feel free to turn that on. And if you would, please keep your microphone muted. I'll also encourage you to utilize the chapter or workshop. If you've joined us before, we love to engage with you through the chat. Please feel free to introduce yourself, ask questions, share resources and tips with other participants. And we are just thrilled to have you here with us this morning. The Roanoke Regional Small Business Development Center is a small and mighty team that serves small businesses throughout our region. We offer confidential advising, education, workshops, events, and other online resources to help your business thrive. Be sure to check out our website for free resources, worksheets, and articles that will help you run your business smoothly. While we do a lot of workshops and training, we highly encourage you to get matched with an advisor who can be a sidekick for all things business. If you are in the Roanoke Valley, Allegheny Highlands, Franklin County, or the New River Valley, you can find out who the best advisor is for you through our advisor match on our website. Let me show you what that looks like. If you aren't in our service area, there is an SBDC office near you. And if you go through our advisor match, we will get you connected to the best SBDC center to serve your business. The Roanoke Regional SBDC is funded in part through a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Small Business Development Center, the United States Small Business Administration, supported by America's Small Business Development Center, the Virginia SBDC, Mason Enterprise Center at George Mason University. Pandemic-related capacity building grant funding is provided by Go Virginia. Other funding is provided by local administrations, economic development offices, organizations, and other small businesses that are champions in your corner. Thank you to our host, the Roanoke Regional Chamber of Commerce, for providing space and support for our work. All right, let's get to the good stuff. Are you ready to take the journey and get going with your business and help with HR? Let's do this. And today we have a super special guest, Ben Ballagah. He is our guest presenter, and Ben and I have been strategizing even before I came to the SBDC a couple years ago to develop this HR series. So Ben has just been instrumental in bouncing ideas and putting together this series. So not only do we had a workshop in February that was about building an employee benefits program. We're offering this program today, and then we'll have a couple other series. So stay tuned and engage with us on social, and our website will be posting those additional workshops, and I'll include those dates in the follow-up email today. All right, Ben, if you want to introduce yourself, and I'm going to swap slides here, and we will keep rolling.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Benjamin Ballagah. I currently live in the Roanoke area and have been fascinated with HR for a while. I got my start in healthcare, actually in Orlando, but relocated back up here because I'm originally from Virginia. I have seen HR in a lot of different capacities. Also having been in small businesses and large businesses, I believe some of these topics should be pretty helpful to you. As a culminating effort, I just completed a semester with Virginia Western Community College as an instructor for teaching human resources with a hospitality program that they're starting. So it was a lot of fun. So some of this stuff may have more of a hospitality feel to it. It's unintentional, but a lot of this stuff will spread very easily through many different types of industries. Very excited to be here, and I look forward to having a dialogue with y'all about your thoughts. So let's get started. Human resources and you. I really tried to zoom as far out as I could with this and think, if I started a business today with perfect human resources, what would that start with? So we started with some very, very open and broad topics. Heather, let's go to the next slide, please. I started with mission, vision, and values. Whenever a company starts or whenever I'm trying to get to know a company, the area that I always want to get started is, every entrepreneur, I believe, has in one way or the other some sort of goal or vision that they want to achieve, that there's something that sets them apart, that makes them unique. That's why they're motivated to start this business and branch out on their own. And knowing what your mission, vision, and values are does have a very important part of human resources. So what kind of company do you want to be a part of? What is it supposed to feel like? Your employees and your customers need to feel something, and that should be spelled out in your mission and vision and values. So my example about halfway down the slide is, what type of service or product leads to a feeling within your customers? And it shouldn't be something as simple as, well, we want our customers to feel good or to feel happy. I think that's a little shallow. I challenge people to go a little further in depth and say, that they want people to feel special or appreciated, or, we want to empathize with our customers. It really depends on the industry, but there's so many wonderful words that we can pursue as operators that can be spelled out in our mission. Also, team members should be able to copy and paste this type of mission into their everyday actions. This is something that they can live and breathe. So one of my favorites is we have a hospital system here in Roanoke. Their mission is to improve the health of the communities that they serve. That's a very broad mission, but it does, who doesn't want to feel healthier? I can identify with that. It's not as easy as it used to be, trust me. So, having a team of healthcare workers in a very big healthcare organization that want to improve my health, that's something that I would want to be a part of. And then, of course, with your vision, there are goals that are set with that. Do you want to be the best at something? Do you want to be the first at something? Do you want to be do you want to follow? Do you want to be the third best? It's not a bad thing if you want to be a follower in your respective industry, but if that's your strategy, don't say that you want to be the best, because by definition, you should not be. There's a lot of very successful businesses that are not the most expensive. They are the second or third or fourth most expensive, and there's a market for them there. So, that goal plus putting it into timetables to say, at the end of the day, we want to be the ideal solution for one person, or at the end of the week, or at the end of the month. Those are good goals because they do uphold kind of a smart structure where we can say, hey, this is something that we can make sure that we're doing each period. And that is a great way to unify your team. So mission, vision, and values, these are good for your customers, your team members, and just make sure that Next slide, please. So when we have our mission and vision and values, we start to build our team based off of that. Some of us might be in situations where we started out as a sole proprietor and we were the one person operation. Then others of us have had to have employees from day one. It really depends on what we do. When I was creating the spreadsheet, I was just trying to think of various things that I know that have gotten overlooked in some of the small businesses that I've been a part of. But I do think that they're essential and worthwhile because they do make a difference over time. We started with an employee handbook. That's where you're going to find a lot of your mission and vision and values and things like that. We are also going to want to dive into job descriptions or essential job functions and understand exactly where those lines are drawn and how that can be helpful for us. And then also employee files, just some helpful guidelines as far as what makes a good employee file, what you might want to have in there and what you definitely don't want to have in there. Because in the event that you do need to refer back to an employee file, you want to make sure that it upholds, the company's agenda. Next slide, please. Let's dive into each one of these. Starting with the employee handbook, like I said, this is, I think about that first person, they're just starting their career and they know nothing except they want to work. This is where they're first introduced to their mission and vision and values. That's why it's so important that these are so well thought out, is because yes, you were able to hire somebody and you got them in the door and they've accepted, an offer was reached. But now that they're here, now what? Now is your opportunity to, on day one, inspire in them what your company is all about and how they contribute to it. Why would a person come back to work if they did not know, what piece they are in the puzzle that is your company? So this is a great opportunity to spell that out in the employee handbook. Also learning about the rest of the team. I remember my first day ever at any job. I won't say where, but it rhymes with Burger King. And it was very scary. I was 16 and I did not know anything. And they just kind of said, all right, stand here, do this for 4 hours and then leave. And it was weird. I was like, this can't be what work is. And the more I worked at it and I turned it into something, but not everybody does that. So you have the opportunity from day one to institute the culture of the company, where the company's coming from and what the purpose is. Take advantage of that, because if you don't, somebody else will. And that might be a good thing, but it could also come back and bite you if you're not careful. So think about how that needs to be spelled out in the employee handbook to inspire people to pick up and carry the company with you. Other things that I think are very important to put into an employee handbook is, what's the open door policy look like? It's important to have that out there to know that if they do see something wrong, who to call, when, what to do about it, and know that they're not going to be retaliated against. I think those are very helpful things because that inspires people to do and say, and escalate the best possible things, because they might see things that you don't, and that can help the company. So keep that open. It is important to spell out where are you in terms of union expectations or solicitation and distribution, regardless of what kind of industry you're running. I think it's important that everybody knows that from day one, because I maybe putting union expectations at the front of this bullet point can make some people back away, but it's really not supposed to be that way. It's important that you understand that solicitation and distribution and how closely that's linked with union expectations. If somebody brings in Girl Scout cookies to your company, what does that mean as far as your connection with union expectations? All of that should be spelled out in the employee handbook so everyone's on the same page. It works in some organizations. It doesn't necessarily work in other organizations, but you as the operator have the option to cast that die on day one. Also, Equal Opportunity Employment Commission, let's talk about those. What kind of employment are we running here? Is this a temporary job, or is this, full-time with benefits? Is this at will? Or, is this something where it's time-based assignment, and then once that time is over, thank you for your, for your service. All of those are good things because typically that's something that's going to be generalized for the company, not necessarily so much for the job. It really depends on your situation. And you have the, again, you have the option to talk about that first so that everybody hears the same message and not just one person. That is employee handbooks. Before we go any further, do you mind if we just take a quick pause, have any questions come in? Or I see a lot of chat popping up, but I can't read them because they happen so fast.
I don't see any questions in the chat yet, Ben. We've just been introducing ourselves and.
Okay.
But if anyone has any questions, feel free to unmute, or if you want to drop those questions in the chat for Ben about what he's presented thus far, and I will. Oh, super. All right. Now we have a question from Patrice. How and where do you obtain some of the verbiage for your handbook? Any websites and develop that you would recommend as they're starting to develop a handbook?
Sure. It's funny. I used to work for a company that was based out of Chicago. And this company was for assisted living. I'm an executive director with an assisted living group. And so that's just kind of my background in healthcare right now. But the headquarters was in Chicago. And it was funny to me because the headquarters for McDonald's is also located in Chicago, which I didn't know that right off the bat, but I learned it through, I don't know how I learned it. Doesn't matter. Anyway, I was looking at the mission and vision and values of my company that I was a part of at the time. And then I looked at the mission and vision and values of McDonald's. And there was like 4 bullet points. Out of the 4 to 5 bullet points, like more than half almost lined up verbatim. And nothing wrong with that. I don't think that any of this stuff is copywritten or, I mean, it's, if you like great customer service and I want to like great customer service, then you can do that. My whole point in that story is that I find that the best place to start is to look at other companies that I think that you admire. And it does not have to be in the same industry. I didn't challenge my COO at the time and said, hey, you play golf with the guy from McDonald's, don't you? But I do think that's important because number one, if you love the way that Starbucks does what they do and you want to look at how they've organized it, they put that stuff out there, you can find it. So I think that's a great place to start when you're looking for those aha moment words that say, oh, I'm inspired by this phrase. And you see how it lives itself out. I would definitely start there. You're welcome. That was a good question. Okay, well, we'll take some more questions whenever I run out of breath because that was the real reason I wanted to take those questions. All right, what's next? Let's see, next slide. Okay, other things. Again, we're still on day one. For 16-year-old me, who just started my career with your company, what are my job expectations? The job description is great because a lot of times, especially nowadays on your phone, you could go on Indeed and find job descriptions out the wazoo, and they're all good. I mean, they tell you what the job is in very general terms, but they don't necessarily tell you how the job is going to be evaluated and what the job expectations are. So these are fantastic things if you're putting these in the employee handbook, fantastic. These I would also recommend could be, these could also be addendums to an employee handbook, because sometimes these policies will change a lot quicker than your mission, vision, and values might. Really depends on how your operation is growing or performing. So job expectations, a very popular one is attendance and punctuation. I work in the service industry, and you'd be surprised at how hard it is to serve people when your staff is not in the building. I get it, life happens to all of us, but how do we handle that as an organization? That's the kind of stuff that you want to think out and lay out very early in the operation, so that so that your employees know. I give you a perfect example is that if you have one employee that works one shift a month, or let's make it 2 shifts a month, and they call out for one of them, then they called out for 50% of their shifts. And do you hold that person to the same standard that someone that works 20 days a month and called out one time? Do they get to call out for 10 of those shifts and still get held to the same standard? Probably not, but you want to make sure that that's very clear so that everybody's on the same page. This is important because if you have to go into an unemployment hearing, one of the questions that are going to come up is how is this visualized? How did the employee know that this is how we look at attendance and punctuality? So spell that out. Other points, I've never really understood the difference between sick time and vacation time. Me personally, especially for my industry, if you're in the building, then you're here. If you're not in the building, then you're not here. It's all the same to me. I mean, I hope you're not sick. But if you're throwing up or riding roller coasters, I'm still covering your job, so it doesn't matter. Again, other companies do that differently, and it works great for them. But spell that out so that everybody knows what's going on. What is the standard for bringing doctor's notes in? Does that excuse an absence? I would hope not, because anybody can get a doctor's note from anywhere. Also, is that person safe if they've been out for an extended period of time, like with COVID or any other illness? Do they require a doctor's note before returning to work? Again, that'll depend on your industry. I take care of 80 and 90-year-old people, and they have a susceptible immune system. It's very important that I know that people are healthy when they come back to work. That might not be the case for other businesses. How do we pay for time away from work? What is the process for calling in or getting an approved leave of absence or vacation? All these things, trust me, your employees want to know this stuff, and the better you spell it out, the better they're going to understand the rules of the game. If you remember the first time you ever sat down and played Monopoly, it probably wasn't very much fun. I still don't have fun playing Monopoly because I don't know all the rules and my wife does. But in this situation, you want your employees to know the rules so that they can play the game, so to speak, and be successful with it. Because if they're successful, then your company should be successful. So that's attendance. What's our next slide? Payroll process. Very simply, there's a lot of great programs out there and that are very much online based. If you're using them, you need to tell your employees about them and how that can benefit the employee. If paper checks and you're still doing it by hand, then good for you. I did it by hand for many, many years. And personally, that I prefer it. But how does that work for the employees? And when can they expect their checks? Do they have the option for direct deposit? Do they have an option for paper checks? I assure you they want to know, so you might as well tell them. Same thing with benefits packages. When are they eligible for benefits packages? If a company can provide benefits, group benefits for their employees, then they definitely should. It's one of the reasons that a lot of us work, so that we're well taken care of, but we want to know that information from the get-go so that we can be, if that's taken care of, then we can take care of the customers and get back to work. I love cell phone policies because I was still very much an experienced manager when cell phones really became a thing. And it was so controversial 15 years ago, 20 years ago, whatever. Nobody should ever have a cell phone. You leave that stuff in your car, I don't want to see it. And, that was like the thing, right? And the employees hated that. Okay. But now, fast forward, there are some jobs, most jobs, that really just cannot be done without cell phones. And it's every company is going to be a little bit different. It is important because cell phones are still very much a, it's not the same everywhere you go. Please make sure that you spell out your cell phone policy and know, how an employee can best support your company through their cell phone usage or not. Next slide. Butting up to cell phones is social media policy. And really, I think social media is everywhere I've ever worked. Social media is somebody else's private property, is kind of the approach, but then also, it's not invisible either. And I think that's an important thing to reiterate to all staff members regularly is, what is the expectation? No one's trying to manage social media because, my God, would that be excruciating? I do not want to see my employees' various pages and accounts, but if they are going to be posting things, it is important that I tell them, hey, if you want to do this, this is the best way to support our company. So, if you're learning about Google algorithms and how an employee's Google account can boost your score in the Google algorithm through positive reviews, then talk about that. If they have something that they want to vent about, probably not the best idea to put it on Instagram. But they have an open door policy that they can use if they want to make a positive difference. It's important that employees understand that. We really don't, in my industry, we really don't have a tremendous problem with social media, policies. It's pretty well contained, and people, respect the calm, if you will. I'm knocking on wood as I say that. But for a while, there was a period in time in social media where, all bets were off, and it got a little wild there for a minute. I always put theft of company property because I really did have to go to an unemployment hearing, and the advocate for the employee did tell me, well, you never told them that stealing was wrong, so how would they supposed to know? That is a true story, and I specifically did say that. I'm like, hold on a second. that's part of the company expectation. But there's a lot of money that can disappear out of your doors if you don't set a tone with company theft. It could be theft of company time, it could be office supplies, it could be furniture. We don't know. But it's always important to say, okay, well, this is what the expectation is, and these are the consequences if it does happen. I think it's good. I think it's better to have it in there so that you're covered than to not have it in there and have to rebuy a computer because somebody thought that it was okay to take it home. So that's theft and company property. Appearance and uniform expectations. In my industry, we try to create a uniform environment because we are a service industry and we are in the public eye. And we have a lot of customers. For every one employee that works in my community, there's probably about 15 customers that person's taking care of. And we have a 90 apartment community, so we have a lot of employees. Not only is it important for them to understand the right appearance in terms of workers' comp and what the right thing to wear is from a safety standard, but then also it's important to know and set a tone with your employees to say, okay, look, not only is it important that you're representing the company while you're on the clock, but you also need to understand that you're representing the company if you're wearing your uniform when you're off the clock. My classic example is the person that, if I have an employee and their shirt says my company name and they do a great job and they, we've achieved all our standards, and then they go out on Friday night to a bar and get blitzkrieged and get into a huge fight and get arrested and put on the 11 o'clock news, and they still have their uniform on. Well, that's kind of not the publicity that anybody wants. Now, has that ever happened to me? Yes. And is it easy to wash off? No. Because you have a superstar employee that just had a really good and then really bad night doing nothing that was associated with their job except wearing a shirt. And yet, here we have the news that have picked it up, and it's a very, very sticky situation. So, just make sure that if you do have a uniform, if it does represent your company, understand, everybody just needs to be on the same page. If they want to go out partying after work, take your name badge off, for the love of God, because I don't know why you'd be drinking with a name badge on, but whatever. It does happen. Next slide, please. Drugs and alcohol. This again is kind of like cell phones. It has been a moving target. There's been legalization of certain substances that I just had in an interview the other day, and she looked at me and she said, look, I really would love this job, but I don't think I can pass a drug test. And I'm like, okay, well, that's really awesome that you're that forthcoming, but what are we talking about? And she said, well, I recreationally smoke marijuana. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's no reason to stop, because, what was, now 6 or 7 years ago, that person probably wouldn't have been a serious candidate. With the legalization of it, now they are. It's weird, I guess. What people do in their personal lives is really none of my business, but, your policy should talk about, being fit for duty and what that looks like and what the action steps would be if you're displaying behaviors, especially changes in behaviors, and what that process would look like, so that it's not a surprise for staff, because there are safety components in drugs and alcohol that you can't have in your workplace. So make sure that all of that is very specific, so that, if somebody did try to hold your company accountable, you can at least show that you showed them. Same thing with smoking policy, or any type of form of tobacco or smokeless tobacco. Or do we consider vapes smokeless tobacco? I don't know. Whatever the people are doing these days, you should have a policy on that. Again, safety. Fire, for me, in a communal living environment, fire marshal's very specific about smoking, because if I have too many cigarette butts that are within a certain distance from my building, that can be a risk. I have a lot of flower beds, I have a lot of mulch, and I have a designated smoking space. So there shouldn't be cigarette butts, right? So, if there are, then that says something different. Does your team know what your policy is on smoking? Also from timing standpoints, because when does a person get to use tobacco should also be mentioned. Performance reviews, how often do they happen? Is there a raise associated with a performance review? Is that raise budgeted or non-budgeted? And these are important questions. There's a lot of confusion among staff about when raises are given and how raises are calculated. And I try very hard to pull that veil back, because the whole purpose of giving raises is to motivate people to do more than just not get fired. So understanding how somebody's performance review and their merit increase go together are very important. And then what they're being evaluated on. There's a lot of different ways to do an evaluation. Are you comparing them with your company's goals? Are you comparing them with their own personal goals or the goals of the team? Are you comparing them with themselves or against other employees? That, how is that of similar tenure? We have to know how performance reviews are done. My recommendation would be to give them a copy of their performance review on day one, so at least they know what they have to do for the next 364 days to be considered a rock star, as it were. And then going back to how a person's evaluated, I recommend trying to do a combination of various types of evaluation methods so that you include team goals, but then also individual goals. Looking at their tenure, but then also looking at their overall contributions. There's a lot of ways to combine all those into one performance evaluation. But you want it to have substance. You want it to have, there to be a lot of gravity to it, so the employee understands, exactly what, where they stand within the company. That covers job expectations beyond the job description. Any questions about any of those?
And we do have a question. Sure. When you mentioned a couple slides ago, an at-will employee, would you expand on that and how that impacts the EEOC practice? Sure.
So at-will employment is basically that, there's different states have different classifications of how they consider employment. Virginia, and I'm assuming everyone's in Virginia because it's the only state I know by heart, is an at-will state. Give me just a second. I'm going to pull up some more information on that. My limited understanding of it was always that an at-will employment is going to be a situation where, condition of employment is not based on any specific performance indicator. It's not based on any type of time limit or anything like that. You're not contracted to be employed by anyone, and it can stop at any time. Now, typically speaking, now, if you boil it down to its absolute minimum, technically that kind of means that you could walk in one day after, having a wonderful month last month and lose your job on the absolute next day for almost no reason. However, smarter companies do include some sort of performance or disciplinary action process that focuses on overall performance over time, so that employees have an opportunity to improve. It's one thing if there's a layoff and there's no, it's not based on performance at all. That still falls under at will. But a lot of my experience has been by giving people opportunities to improve, and then if and when they don't, then of course we would move forward with a separation of employment.
Super, thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And Danielle has offered to share a few things. So Danielle, if you will unmute, or if you want to add any additional thoughts to the chat, that would be more than welcomed.
Sure, I'll add them to the chat so I can articulate them best.
Perfect. Thank you so much for volunteering to share with the rest of us.
Thank you.
We can all learn together. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Ben, are you ready to move on to the next slide, or were there anything else you wanted to cover here?
Nope, ready to go.
Okay, super.
Job descriptions. I enjoy writing job descriptions, and I know that might sound a little weird, but this is a great opportunity to capture what kind of knowledge, skills, and abilities are put into a great candidate. This is what you're going to want to use whenever you're advertising for, any job postings, but then it's also more than that. It's a great roadmap for your new employee to know who they report to, what their actual title is. Are they salaried? Are they not salaried? What type of job do they have? And what their responsibilities are. This should be married very closely to what your job evaluation looks like. There should be a lot of the same terminology there. What's going to be our next slide here? I also enjoy, it is a separate document. However, it does travel with the job description, is the essential job functions. This is something that I would recommend that all of you, if you have an insurance carrier, you should be going through a process of going through essential job functions, so that an insurance carrier is going to want to know, does this person stand regularly, or how often? Is it frequently, occasionally, so on and so forth? And they have, I'm sure a lot of you have seen these before, because it'll have one for lifting 25 pounds, lifting 45 pounds, so on and so forth. Essential job functions are great for new hires to get, along with their employee handbook, because then they know specifically, are they picking up too much? Probably not. But, how do they do that? How do they do that safely? And what are some of the job functions that they should not be doing? Because I don't know how to drive a forklift. If that's not spelled out, then I might try, and that could be a super big liability for the company. So knowing some of these things in the job description and the essential job functions, I believe, are very, very important on day one. I think that concludes that section. Now, as an executive director, one thing that I have spent a lot of time on, particularly for state compliance, is employee files. I have upwards of 70 employees in my currently, and so it does take a little bit of time to go through each employee file. Now, if you are currently a smaller business than that, employee files might not take you as long, but it is important information, because this is your record that you have done all the things that we've just talked about. Plus, it also supports your employee. It's your connection between the two of y'all. So important information, of course, contact information, as well as emergency contact information. You have to have that. Excuse me. You have to have that stuff. Another good thing is a complete resume or application, because you have to be able to prove, did this person just show up on your doorstep one morning, or did they actually go through a recruiting process? And if so, did that recruiting process, have that application process? Interview questions, we're talking about the interview process. Have these pre-done in advance and make sure that every applicant has the same set of questions. It's okay that you can drill in after they do, answer. You can always ask them beyond their answer, but make sure that, when you have a formal interviewing process, that it's effective and fair. You might have a question on there that doesn't have anything to do with the job. And it's really not effective. And if you fill a couple of positions, you might find out, that question doesn't really apply anymore and we need to get it off of there. That's okay. Another hint and best practice that I've used is when interviewing, only write what the applicant says as an answer. I have had to counsel lots of managers, especially newer managers. Please don't ever write your impressions of their answers or what you think they mean. Please don't write any notes about, oh, they wore flip-flops to their, interview. It's okay that you remember that, but please don't ever put that on any interview notes because that is discoverable information and it has nothing to do with the actual interview questions. So again, only write what they say. Drill in on some of your questions. I do like that, but only after they've had a chance to answer your original standard questions. Next slide, please. Excuse me. On day one, your employees should have signed the job description and essential job functions. Before they actually do any work, you have to go over this information with them, please. Do not wait until they injure their back to say, oh, by the way, will you sign this essential job functions to show that you were, had shown up too late, had signed this too late after you'd been injured. That's just a good accountability protection piece for your company to show that, that this person was aware of these expectations on day one. If you do have a formal handbook, make sure that they receive it and show that they've received it. Again, job offer letter. I don't like to keep hard copies of these because typically job offer letters are not all the same. And if you've got your pay rate and some confidential information, if you have the opportunity to keep that digitally, it's less likely to be found by prying eyes. Because why does any other supervisor, if you hire somebody, why would anyone need to know what their pay rate is for them to do their job? They don't need to know it, they just want to know it. Some people might consider that to be a form of equity theory. And they say, well, Heather's getting paid $1 more than I am. I'm just gonna, work not as hard as she does. And that's even to me. So keep that stuff out of, it's important to keep it. I just wouldn't keep a hard copy of it if you can help it. Next slide, please. Also, how do you show, and you will need to show some of this stuff eventually. If no one ever asks you for this information ever again, then you can call me up in 5 years and say, Ben, I've been holding on to all this paperwork and I haven't used it once. And I will say, you are welcome because you have well trained your staff. But in the event that you do find yourself in some sort of hearing, an unemployment hearing or anything like that, this paperwork can be really, really helpful. A lot of your employee files will show that you made your employee as safe as possible. Do they know where the fire extinguishers are? Do they know where the emergency exits are? Do they know how to use these things? Very important. Any of my staff could tell you how to find the fire extinguisher, but as I was typing this, I'm like, we really have to test them because not everyone knows how to use a fire extinguisher. And the last thing you want in the event of a fire as somebody reading the side of the fire extinguisher, trying to figure out which end is up. Also, you know, in Virginia, sometimes we will have floods, hurricanes, power outages, and God forbid, a robbery. Do you want to, your employees need to know what to do in these types of events? We could probably add tornadoes to that. I did not put that on there. When I was in college, I worked as a bank teller, and my orientation lasted 5 days. 3 out of those 5 days are knowing what to do in the event of a robbery, because that's a very real thing when you work at a bank. And I would happily give all that money away. I really enjoyed those 3 days of orientation. Also, where is the first aid kit? First aid, you know, knowledge of basic life saving is typically not required for a lot of different jobs, but knowing where the first aid kit is can be very, very helpful. And then understanding what to do in the event of an emergency. The last thing I want to do is get a phone call from my staff if I have, when they should be on the phone with 911. So spelling that out is important in your employee files. Next slide, please. This is, I'll be honest with you guys, this is really just kind of tip of the iceberg type stuff. Heather and I have been working on this however long it's been. And and I sat down and I was sitting at my desk and I said, well, you know, what do I work on, and what has been helpful to me over time? And a lot of this was based off of personal experiences, but this is certainly not all there is to know about human resources. If anyone needs a textbook, be happy to let you borrow it. But you know, at the end of the day, it's kind of like sharpening a knife. And the day that you're not working on something with this type of, you know, information or similar things, depending on your industry, you know, it's always one of those things that it's a reinvestment in your staff, and I think it's totally. Any other questions?
Thank you so much, Ben, for sharing. And I agree, these are the tip of the icebergs. Ben and I, as he shared, have a whole laundry list, and we could have a session on human resources every month for you all. So if there's other topics that you would like us to cover, I do have a couple other questions. And as we're rounding up our time together today, I am going to post, I'm going to stop sharing your slides. Let's see here. And I'm going to post our evaluation. This just gives us some feedback that would be super helpful for us as we are working on always refining our workshops. And this is all confidential that comes back to me and our team here. I did have a couple other questions in the chat, Ben, that folks have posted. Let me get the chat back up. Let's see here. For the employee files, are they all filed digital, or are they filed in a filing cabinet?
What I do is I try to do a combination of both. Currently, I have a system that upholds a lot of, you know, you scan a lot of PDFs up and upload them into this database. This is the same system that we run our benefits through, and our time and attendance through, and our payroll through. So it's kind of a one-stop shop. However, I know that's not going to be as available for smaller businesses. So it really just depends. Even though we have uploaded these documents, we do keep paper copies. We're overseen by the Department of Social Services, and part of what they evaluate every year is going to be our employee files. And when the inspectors here in the building, they just want the paper copy. So I know specifically what they're looking for, and I have paper copies of that ready to go. Likewise, Yeah, so I find that a duplicate, online is helpful. It's easier to find stuff typically, and it's less likely to get lost, but that's just me. Ultimately, you got to do what works best for you.
I do have a question specific to my business.
Sure.
It has to do with medical providers, so mental health providers.
Mhm.
I will tell you what I am very confused on. I'm in Virginia, and I am aware that there is a DSS background check that has to occur for the medical providers to have access to patients or clients.
Right.
I understand that there are also three different Virginia State Police forms. I honestly do not know which is the appropriate one. I've been having my people do all of them, but I think that that's just not right. Can you tell me which are, and you might not know, but because it's specific to my industry, but do you happen to know which is the required
Mhm.
forms for healthcare workers or for employees of or employers of healthcare workers to have on file for when inspection is done?
How many of these are you doing a year? Roughly? Oh.
5 to 7.
Okay. The first thing I would offer is I do quite many more than 5, but there is an online function for Virginia State Police background checks, which is so much easier. But I live with you, and I have made the same mistake on those paper forms.
Mhm.
If I can get your name after this, I will forward you
Sure.
my contact at the Virginia State Police,
Thank you.
and we can ask her together.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, let's see. There's one other question. In Virginia, are commission-only sales jobs legal, or is there a minimum wage state law that overrules?
My understanding of minimum wage is more complicated than I thought it was. My understanding is that your minimum wage has to, what they pay you has to at least be minimum wage, based off of the number of hours that they have you working. However, you can make more based off of your sales. Of course, it's the goal, but I'm not sure how they would get around paying you less than minimum wage. And I'm basing this off of, I just got done teaching this. We were talking about wait staff and servers in a restaurant that make $2.13 an hour. I did that for many, many years. And if your tips plus your hourly wage do not equate minimum wage for the hours that you work, then typically they have to, there has to be an adjustment there. Now, if you work at the right place, your tips are always going to be higher than that. But I believe, yeah, I don't know if you can go beneath minimum wage, even on 100% commission, unless that was spelled out specifically in the job offer.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben. I know that was, some of these are super technical. One of the things that I jotted down is even expanding our series to include a legal workshop on human resources.
Yeah.
Down the road. So we are at 10:59, so we're going to wrap things up today. I am posting a link to our contact information and the YouTube channel in the chat for us. I'll encourage you to follow us on social media if you are not already. There's lots of great information available for you to share, and we look forward to continuing to collaborate with you and attending our future human resources workshops here in the future. So we will be posting those on our website which is www.roanokesmallbusiness.org. And our Instagram and YouTube channel is Roanoke Regional Small Business, Roanoke Regional SBDC, excuse me. Let me post that in the chat for us. All right. Well, thank you all for carving out time to join us this morning. As I mentioned, I will be sharing a link to the presentation and our slides with you after today's workshop. And I'll make sure that we have shared our contact information as well. We are here to support you as you're continuing to grow your business, and excited to support you on your journey. Well, I hope everybody has a great rest of your day, and thank you again so much for being here.
Can we get the one, I'm sorry, I don't have her name, but the one person.
So the name is Tracy, Tracy, and it's interesting because I can't see the contact